The elevator beeped as it reached its destination, the door opening with a silent swish. Ozpin and Galinda stepped out, their feet echoing in unison. Ozpin reached out one hand, clicking his fingers together to activate the lights to his office. Their faces were bowed, shoulders slumped, but there was also a sense of relief to their posture. "Do you think she'll be okay?" Galinda asked. "The procedure. It seemed to go without incident." "It was a success, Galinda. All that is left now is to monitor Miss Schnee and see how she adapts." "Do you expect side effects?" "At this point, I'm not sure what to expect," Ozpin said. "This is new technology after all. James wasn't able to test this on people. He wasn't willing to take that risk. With good reason, Ozpin." "I know. It was not a criticism." He sighed. "Miss Schnee is alive and well. For now, all we can do is return her to her team and hope for the best. This must be done quickly." "I'm already surprised her absence hasn't aroused Ozpin froze. His hand shot out, cutting the woman beside him off before she could take another step. His eyes, narrowed and hard, were focused on his desk, and the chair sat behind it. "Ozpin?" Galinda asked. Ozpin ignored her. His eyes remained focused on the chair as it turned, slowly revealing the sole occupant. Galinda gasped, reaching for her weapon, but he leveled a hand over hers before she could. This was not a moment for rash decisions. "Did I interrupt your conversation?" Jean-Arc asked. He sat in the chair and leaned forward to rest his elbows on Ozpin's desk. "I do apologize. Please continue." His face was cold, calculated, furious. "Mr. Ark," Ozpin said, "I must admit, I did not expect to see you here. Were you looking for me, perhaps? I do apologize. I was out of my office and failed to leave a note." "Where is my partner, Ozpin?" "Jean-Arc!" Galinda roared, unhappy with being ignored. She took a step forward, pushing past Ozpin's hand. "I would have an explanation for why you were here, young man. You cannot break into the headmaster's office, nor make demands of him." Jean's eyes never left Ozpin's. "Where is my partner?" he repeated. "Miss Schnee is recovering in the infirmary," he said. "She had a minor incident, but it looks fit to make a full recovery. I was about to send a message to your squirrels explaining what had happened." "Oh? And would you care to explain what happened?" "As I said, it was a small incident." "How clumsy of her," Jean whispered. "Did she trip? Maybe she fell into the basement as well. Perhaps she slipped into a strange machine that played games with her soul. Is this ringing any bells, Ozpin?" Ozpin's eyes widened. Galinda moved. She crossed the distance between them and Jean in an instant, intent on apprehending the student who knew too much. While she would not kill, interrogation was not beyond expectation, and her weapon was already half drawn before she arrived. Jean's was fully drawn and tickled the underside of her chin. Ozpin's lips tightened, and he realized the boy had kept it hidden beneath the desk, already unsheathed and ready for combat. Somehow, that didn't surprise him. Those dark blue eyes were like pools of black now, and his arms didn't waver. There was no doubt, no hesitation, not a single shred of mercy. In that moment, Ozpin knew full well he would kill Galinda if she pushed forward. Whether he could would be another matter, but as for the intent, it was there in full. "There is no need for this," Ozpin said, taking a step forward and making sure not to make any aggressive motions. "Galinda, please sheath your weapon. There will be no violence in my office." Her eyes flashed. "But Headmaster, he knows." "That is not a suggestion. Sheath your weapon and step back." Galinda looked like she would do nothing of the sort, and for a moment, he feared blood might be shed. She looked down into Mr. Ark's eyes, however. Whatever she saw there, it confirmed what he too believed. She grunted and stepped back, slamming her crop back into its holster. "There," she said, eyes fixed on her student. "You may relax now, Mr. Ark." "Funny," he said. "I don't think I can. Where is Weiss?" Now Galinda," Ozpin said. "You can't ask a huntsman to put their weapon away when they are surrounded by enemies." "We are his teachers," she hissed. "We are not his enemies." "Right now, he believes we are." Ozpin stepped forward, making sure his hands were both empty and visible. He pulled out a seat and sat down, opposite his own chair at his own desk. The Ark family blade remained at the top of the woodwork, but didn't seem likely to strike him anytime soon. He looked the student in the eye, and then turned to Galinda. "I believe your work is done for the night, Galinda. Why don't you get some rest? There'll be enough work for us all tomorrow." "What? Ozpin, you must be joking." "Galinda." He made sure to look her in the eyes, stressing her name for emphasis. The stern woman stared back, defiant and proud. She clenched her teeth and looked to Jean, and then looked back to him. It took a few moments, but eventually she growled and spun on the spot. Her heels clicked angrily on the tiles as she stormed off to the elevator. He had a feeling he'd pay for that later. "There," Ozpin said, smiling at Jean. "We have some privacy now, which is what I believe you wished. I'll mention again, Miss Snee is fine and safe. She is recovering in the infirmary as we speak." "You don't know that she's fine." The boy, no, the man said. "You won't know until she wakes up. And even then you won't know until time proves it. There's a good chance she might never wake up, or that when she does, she will no longer be Weiss Snee." Jean's eyes narrowed. "But then, you knew that, didn't you?" Well, it seemed lying was out of the question. "I was aware of the risk." A hand slammed down on the table. "That was a rhetorical question, you fuck!" Jean-Arc stood, eyes blazing. He practically spat his words. Any and all traces of the calm, collected, and sarcastic man he knew were gone. "I know that you know, even as I know you wouldn't give a damn so long as it serves your purpose." Both his fists crashed down onto the desk. "Fuck you! What were you even thinking?" "Of the protection of the people of Vale and Beacon," Ozpin said. "I'd explain why, but I have a feeling you already know. Isn't that right, Jean?" "You don't seem surprised." Jean snarled and sat down. "You are, though. You just hide it well." "And you hide this side of you well, too," Ozpin complimented. "Had someone told me when you first joined how furious you could be, how dangerous you might appear, then I might have called them a fool." He leaned forward. "You are angry, Mr. Ark. I can understand this." "Oh, you can?" Jean laughed, leaning back in his chair. "Oh, that's great. I'm angry and you can understand? Well, fan-flippin-tastic, I guess. All my problems are solved now." The laughter cut off as quickly as it had come. "I'm beyond angry, Ozpin," Jean hissed. "This is not my angry face. This is my murder face, and I am 2 seconds away from not being responsible for my actions." "It's a face that has seen use," Ozpin remarked politely. "I can tell. I wonder if it's the face you wore when you murdered Roman." Ozpin's eyes widened when he caught the honest surprise on the young man's face. "You didn't know? Oh, I suppose that actually was an accident then. Forgive me. Even you can be susceptible to drugs, I suppose." "Huh. So I did kill him. I guess that explains things." Ozpin didn't fail to notice how Jean wasn't at all bothered by the revelation. He seemed more surprised than shocked, but only in the way one might be if they suddenly realized they put 3 spoons of sugar in their coffee instead of 2. Jean-Arc was dangerous. But then again, he'd known that for a while, hadn't he? "I'll admit that I did not expect you to know about the maiden," Ozpin admitted. "I'll apologize for my deceit earlier. Consider it a polite attempt to not frighten you. I can assure you that Miss Schnee chose this of her own accord. She accepted the offer I made. I did not deceive her as to the risk." "Of course she did. She's always been like that. Too willing to sacrifice." He growled under his breath. "Why though? What was she thinking?" "If I may, I believe she was thinking that she wished to protect you and your team." Jean looked horrified. He shook his head as though to deny it, but stopped himself. He knew as much as anyone how far his partner would have gone for him. It was the kind of dedication they encouraged in their students. Admittedly, even he had never thought it might go so far, or that such terrible means might be necessary in the first place. Life made a fool of them all. "Damn her," Jean whispered. "I can't. No, I can believe she'd do it, and that's the problem. Why on her own though? Why couldn't she talk to us? To me?" The young man's eyes sharpened, looking back into him. "It doesn't matter. I want to know why Weiss. Why her?" "She's the best candidate." "You're lying." Ozpin hesitated. "How so?" "Pyrrha was the best candidate. She's the obvious choice. If you think I'll fall for that ridiculous story, you've got another thing coming." Jean's eyes hardened. "Don't play games with me, Ozpin. I am not in the mood." The two of them stared at one another, and an odd air filled the room, with him on the wrong side of the desk, and potentially on the wrong side of the student Irie. It was an unusual experience. Ozpin couldn't say he liked it, but he wasn't willing to make matters worse. Miss Nikos would have been the first choice, he admitted. She was also the one that a colleague of mine suggested. Ironwood. Jean waved a hand. "He chose Pyrrha, I know." "You certainly know some interesting things, Mr. Ark." "Yes. General Ironwood was all for Miss Nikos, as was I at first." Ozpin tasted the words in his mind, wondering how they would be taken. Jean gave nothing away. His eyes were those not of a young and innocent student who would have been cooed or convinced easily. In the end, he just went with it. Our choices changed, however. Miss Schnee was chosen instead. "That doesn't make sense. Pyrrha is the strongest. She's a championship fighter. Why would you choose Weiss?" Jean shook his head. "It doesn't make sense. You're lying." "Why would I lie? Why would you choose Weiss over Pyrrha?" "That isn't information for you, Mr. Ark," he warned. "The hell it isn't," Jean yelled. "Tell me!" "Or you'll do what?" Jean allowed his sword to click against the table. Ozpin was not intimidated. "You are a powerful young man, Mr. Ark. Of that there is no doubt." He allowed a little of his aura to show. "I, however, am beyond you. Do not make the mistake of thinking otherwise." His hand crackled with energy, the force of which could have eradicated the office if he so chose. He expected Jean to back down. He expected him to become angry. He did not expect him to smile. "Then you'll have to kill me," he said. "I won't stop until I'm dead or you are. I wonder what Weiss would think of that. I wonder how much loyalty she would have to you after she finds out you killed the man she loves. I wonder what she would do with all this newfound power of hers." Jean-Arc leaned forward, eyes blazing. "Shall we find out?" Ah, a threat. Now they were in familiar territory. Ozpin allowed himself to smile, relaxing. Like it or not, the young man had a fair point, and killing him would defeat the purpose he could serve anyway. Well said, Mr. Ark. Well said. Tell me then, if you were to hold this over my head, what is it you wish to truly know? I want to know why you chose Weiss to be the Fall Maiden. Not what the Fall Maiden is, or why someone needed to be chosen, or why we were the ones to do so in the first place. Jean glared at him. So, he already knew. Interesting. Disturbing too. But for some reason he didn't believe the man before him capable of harming the new maiden. Very well, Ozpin said. I shall explain. He laid his arms on the table, smiling. On first appearance, Miss Nikos is indeed the better candidate for the maiden. She is individually strong and skilled, with a semblance that leads itself well to a combat role. On the other hand, Miss Snee was a risk of her own. The Snee family have made it no secret of how much they desire power and influence, and granting that to someone of unknown loyalties was always a danger. Jacob Snee would love for his daughter to have such power. He would use it for the betterment of his family first, Atlas second, and his allies third. Someone far down the list, the innocent might feature. On first appearances, you would be correct. Miss Nikos was the best choice. Do you know what changed? Jean didn't respond to the bait or to Ozpin's question. As the seconds tickled by in silence, Ozpin realized he wouldn't speak at all. He was too angry for it. Ozpin coughed into his hand and continued. Individual strength can falter. The last maiden was strong, stronger than Miss Nikos now is, and she also knew how to use her power to great effect. That didn't stop her from being defeated, and we expect the same people who did that have come for her again. I doubt they will be any weaker. As strong as she is, Miss Nikos were not able to hold up to them if Amber could not already. Individual strength is worthless here, and Weiss would be different. Not alone, no, he admitted. If the previous maiden couldn't fight alone, then I wouldn't expect any new candidate to do the same. Her teamwork, your teamwork, might give her the edge she needs, should it ever come to defending herself. It will come to it, Ozpin. You know it will. Still, that's not everything. It's not like Pyrrha doesn't fight well with her team. You're hiding something. Am I? He asked. I'm not sure why you're so keen on Miss Nikos being the maiden, Mr. Ark. The only thing holding Weiss back was her name. We feared her loyalty might be called into question, or that she might act in the best interest of the SDC and not fail. You have had an effect on her, however. I don't believe any could question her resolve now. I certainly don't. You and your team have been a powerful influence on her. She would do anything to protect you all. Which makes her easy to manipulate, huh? I did not say that. You don't have to. Jean scowled at him. Even if it's the right reasons, it doesn't change what you're doing to her. Treat me like a fool again, and I'll be out the door. Weiss will come with me. I apologize if I offended you, Ozpin said quickly. You think rather poorly of me, I see. I'll do my best to be more forthright. While Miss Nikos' team has had an admirable record when it comes to teamwork, they are not quite as tested as yours. You have fought against the White Fang on numerous occasions, and even defeated Torchwick. You are best suited to fight enemies who are not mindless grim. Surely even you can see that in terms of tactical ability, versatility, and flexibility. Your team is better suited to this task than Miss Nikos. There was no argument there, and Ozpin found himself nodding to the man opposite him. In truth, you were also one of the reasons we chose her, Mr. Ark. Jean's hands tightened into fists. While your skills may have been in question once, they are not now, Ozpin went on. The way you approach problems is different, your mind sharper than any student's. I believe that if anyone were to have design on her life, you would do everything in your power, and everything beyond to stop them. Such attributes were rare, and although his methods for achieving them was a mystery to him, and a concern to Galinda, there could be no faulting their effects. The body could be strengthened, but it was difficult to hone a mind so sharp. Once again, he wondered just what had forged a young man into such a ruthless individual. You have a willingness to kill if necessary, which it might very much be in her defense, Ozpin went on. Compare that to Miss Rose, who I cannot see making such a difficult decision, even if it were to save her partner's life. Ozpin smiled. You, however, are different. You have the potential to be something more, to defend her from harm. With you by her side, Weissney could become a maiden more than capable of exceeding. Ozpin flinched as the desk cracked. He hadn't realized, but Jean's hands had moved to the edge, and there was now a thin crack running through the wood. "Are you done?" he snarled. "Do you think I don't see what you're doing? You don't need to manipulate me into protecting her. I intended to do that from the start." He took a deep breath. "I'll make one thing clear though, Ozpin. My loyalty is to Weiss. It is not to you. It is not to Ironwood. It is not to whatever petty schemes you have going on. I'll look after her for as long as I can, but it will not be so that she can become your weapon. Am I understood?" Of course, Ozpin waved the issue away. "I meant no offense, nor to suggest you might abandon her in an hour of need. I was only sharing my point that you were also an aspect we considered when it come to whom we might select." "I don't believe that," Jean said. "At least, I don't believe that's the full reason. Even if I'd been on a different team, it wouldn't matter. You would always choose Pyrrha. Something changed. Something is different. It's made you change your mind. Mr. Ark, I can assure you that..." "Ruby." It was whispered softly, yet it cut through Ozpin's words like a hot knife through butter. Well, well, well. Yet another surprise. Curious how Ozpin found himself unsurprised. "It's Ruby, isn't it?" Jean said. "You wanted her in Beacon 2 years early. That's already a ridiculous decision, but I assumed it was just a whim. That's not the case though, is it? You wanted her for what she has, and then when she ended up in the same team as Pyrrha..." His eyes narrowed. "You wouldn't put your eggs in one basket. The maiden's powers and Ruby's eyes. It's just too much power. It's too much concentrated into one place. You couldn't risk both of those things if something happened to the team. You had to spread them out. You had to put it on a different team." Jean stood up. "Weiss wasn't your first choice at all. She was the second best. But you didn't dare risk going with your first choice." Ozpin released a long breath. He remained seated, even though he wished to do anything but. "Impressive," he said, holding back a sigh. "Very impressive. I suppose this is just another example of what I mean when I said you would be a good protector for Miss Schnee. You see things where others do not. You read into things people take for granted. I did not fully lie, however. Even beyond that, I would remind you that Miss Nikos and recently Ruby Rose fought against a suspect in the CCT tower. That suspect escaped after defeating them in combat. That couldn't go ignored, especially if it was the same person who attacked Amber. From the description he received from the two girls, it was similar enough that he didn't dare take the risk. If she had already bested Miss Nikos once, she could do so again. Worse, she had revealed her semblance to the enemy. Her greatest asset had been spent. Your team, on the other hand, remain an unknown. Your accomplishments speak for themselves, and whether or not she is weaker as an individual, I do not believe Team RRNN could defeat the four of you in combat." Ozpin smiled. "Not if you were serious about it. I dare say you would be the deciding factor. Intelligent and cunning strategy often prevail over raw ability. I only rely on that because I'm not strong enough to do anything else. The previous full maiden was strong, Mr. Ark. Now, she is dead. Ozpin sighed. He released a long, sad sigh. Another mistake. Another regret. She was defeated not for ability, but for an ambush, a planned attack. Forgive me if I've come to the conclusion that strength is not enough. I must fight fire with fire. Well, you're certainly playing with it now, so I guess you're on the right track. Give me one good reason why I should help you. Why Schnee? Jean scowled. Give me two. I don't need to. Ozpin rose from his seat, walking past the young man and to the windows overlooking Beacon. He didn't fear an attack from behind. He didn't think Jean capable of such. I won't threaten your partner, Mr. Ark. No. Allow me to call you Jean. I would never go that far. Whatever you think of me, trust that I have the best interests of the majority in mind. I understand that is never a comfort to the minority. My team is not another mountain glen waiting to happen. I won't let it be. And I won't make that mistake again. I've made so many in my life already. More than you can imagine. Jean-Arc laughed. Somehow, I think I've made worse. There was a certainty in his voice that Ozpin found he was unable to call in question. He didn't try to, pushing on instead. You are not a fool, Jean. I believe you're more than aware that the people who went after Amber's life would do the same for your partner. While you were here at Beacon, you will have everything I am capable of providing to assist you in defending her. I will do all I can to keep her safe. Do you believe me on this? I believe you. He growled. That doesn't mean I agree with you. It doesn't mean I'm on your side. No, I suppose it does not. Ozpin sighed and adjusted his glasses. Either way, what is done. Miss Snee is now the Four Maiden, although she only has half the powers. The procedure was a success, but as you've already said, we won't know until she wakes up to see what the side effects might be. Ozpin looked for Jean's reflection in a glass. You know an awful lot more than you should, Jean, since we are both being candid with one another. Would you care to tell me how? He snorted. Would you believe me if I said I know the future? No, Ozpin said, a little disappointed. Well, he supposed he couldn't expect any trust after what he'd done. I would, however, believe you if it were to do with a certain White Fang trader providing information for us. I'm sure I have no idea what you mean. I'm sure you don't, Ozpin said with a little chuckle. I suppose I should thank Silver for what he did, should I ever meet him. He saved many lives. Jean rolled his eyes. I'll be sure to pass it on if I ever meet him. Could you also warn him that my good friend James has grown a personal interest in capturing him? I wouldn't want him to succeed. Whatever, Jean shrugged. Your good friend is pretty much useless anyway. He won't find him. Quite the callous denouncement. Was there something more that even he didn't know? It seemed the young man was involved with more than he expected. The safest option would be to get rid of him, expel and remove him from Beacon. It wasn't possible, however, as Jean well knew. Why Snee would not allow it. She would follow him, and thus walk out the door, holding the maiden's powers to ransom. Jean-Arc was untouchable, and he knew it. I think we're done here, Jean said, standing up. The chair fell over, and he didn't bother to pick it up. I'm going to see my partner. I'm going to sit by her side and make sure she isn't harmed. By you, or by the people who did this. I am not your enemy, Jean. I hope you will come to see this. The young man snorted. He sheathed his sword with a click, keeping his narrowed eyes on Ozpin as he moved toward the elevator. As the door opened, he paused. If she wakes up, and it isn't the same person she was this morning, then I will be your enemy. The door began to close. And believe me, Ozpin, you do not want that.